The convoy rolled through the Iraqi desert at exactly 42 miles per hour, and Sergeant Mara Chun kept her hand steady on the wheel, even though she could feel every pair of eyes watching her from the vehicles behind. They were always watching, waiting for her to prove them right, to confirm what Staff Sergeant Derek Kovac had been saying for 3 months straight. Women do not belong behind the wheel of a combat convoy. Women are liabilities. Women get people killed. Mara adjusted her grip and ignored the static crackling through her headset. The MRAP handled like a brick with an attitude problem, but she had driven worse. She had learned to handle her father's ancient Ford pickup on Montana backroads when she was 12, sliding through mud and ice before her feet could properly reach the pedals. This was just metal and momentum. This was simple. What was not simple was the way Kovac's voice cut through the radio every 15 minutes with some new observation about her driving. Too slow around the corners. Too cautious on the straightaways. Too female for the job, though he never quite said that part out loud where command could hear. The sun hammered down on the windshield, turning the desert into a shimmering pool of heat distortion. Mara squinted against the glare and mentally calculated the distance to FOB Spiker. Another 73 kilometers. Another 2 hours of this. Another 2 hours of proving herself to men who had already decided she could not. In the passenger seat, Private First Class Luis Mendez shifted his rifle and glanced over at her. He was 19 and built like a scarecrow, all knees and elbows and nervous energy. He was also the only person in the entire transport unit who had ever asked her a question that was not designed to make her feel small. "Where did you learn to drive like that?" he had asked last week, after she had reversed a fully loaded MRAP through a tight checkpoint without clipping a single barrier. "My father," she had answered and left it at that. Some truths were too heavy to carry in casual conversation. The radio crackled again. "Chun, tighten up that interval. You're leaving too much space between vehicles." Kovac's voice. Always Kovac's voice. Mara keyed her mic, maintaining safe distance per SOP, Staff Sergeant. "I will decide what is safe. Close it up." She eased off the accelerator just slightly, let the distance collapse by a few meters. Enough to satisfy him. Not enough to actually compromise safety. It was a dance she had learned to perform without thinking, this constant negotiation between doing her job correctly and doing it in a way that would not give him ammunition. Mendez looked at her again. He does not know what he is talking about. He said quietly, his voice not carrying beyond the cab, "You drive better than half the guys in the unit." Mara kept her eyes on the road. Half is not good enough. The convoy stretched out ahead of her like a metal centipede. 14 vehicles carrying supplies and personnel to the smaller outposts scattered across Sulla, Ad-Din province. Routine mission. Low threat assessment. The kind of run that should have been boring, except nothing was ever truly boring when you were surrounded by people hoping you would fail. Before we continue this story, drop a comment and let us know what state you're watching from. Maybe you have witnessed similar acts of courage where you are from. The truth was lodged somewhere behind Mara's breastbone, heavy and sharp. The truth about who her father had been, what he had taught her, why she could read terrain and calculate wind drift and estimate range almost as naturally as breathing. But the truth was a locked box, and she had buried the key somewhere in the Montana dirt 2 years ago when they folded the flag and handed it to her mother. "Sergeant Chun, you are drifting left." Kovac again. "Of course." Mara corrected smoothly, muscle memory taking over. The MRAP rumbled back into perfect alignment. She had not been drifting. He was testing her. He was always testing her. In her personal gear, locked in a hard case under her bunk back at the FOB, was a rifle her father had built by hand. Custom barrel, match-grade trigger, scope calibrated to distances that would make most soldiers blink in disbelief. She had not touched it since arriving in Iraq, had not told anyone it existed. It was a relic from a different version of herself, from a girl who had learned to thread bullets through prairie wind at ranges most people could not see with the naked eye. That girl was gone. That girl had died with her father. Now, there was only this, the grinding monotony of proving she could drive a truck without embarrassing the uniform. The radio went quiet for a blessed moment. Mara watched the road unpull ahead, watched the heat shimmer off the asphalt, watched the rocky hills rise in the distance. Somewhere in the back of her mind, her father's voice whispered the way it always did when she was stressed. "Breathe, Mara. Control what you can control. Let the rest go." She breathed. She controlled the wheel, the speed, the distance. She let Kovac's contempt slide off like water. Mendez cleared his throat. "Can I ask you something?" "Depends on the question. Why did you request deployment here? I mean, you could have stayed stateside. Could have trained new drivers at Benning. Why Iraq?" Mara considered the question, considered the real answer, considered how much truth she was willing to offer. "Because my father served here," she said finally. "Because I wanted to understand what he saw, what he did, why he came back different." That was true enough. It was also incomplete. The whole truth was messy, tangled up in grief and guilt and the desperate need to prove something to a dead man who could no longer hear her. The convoy rolled on. The desert stretched endlessly in every direction, all sand and stone and the occasional burnt-out vehicle rusting slowly under the relentless sun. Mara kept her hands steady. She did her job. She ignored the weight of expectation pressing down on her shoulders like physical force. The radio crackled to life again, but this time it was not Kovac. It was the convoy commander, Lieutenant Vance. "All vehicles, be advised. Intel is picking up increased chatter about our route. Nothing specific, but stay sharp." Mara felt something shift in her chest, some old instinct waking up after months of sleep. She scanned the terrain ahead with new eyes, looking for angles and approaches, for places where trouble could hide. The hills to the east offered elevation. The wadi to the west offered cover. The bridge ahead was a natural choke point. Her father's voice again, quieter this time. "Trust your instincts, Mara. If something feels wrong, it probably is." She keyed her mic. "Sir, request permission to reduce speed approaching the bridge." "Negative, Chun. We are on schedule. Maintain current pace." She wanted to argue, wanted to explain that her gut was screaming at her, that every lesson her father had ever taught her was lighting up warning signals in her brain. But she was just a driver. Just a woman who was lucky to have this job at all, if you ask Kovac. Just a sergeant who needed to follow orders and keep her mouth shut. Mara eased off the accelerator anyway, just slightly. Enough to buy herself a few extra seconds of reaction time. Not enough to trigger another reprimand. The bridge loomed ahead, concrete and rebar spanning a dry riverbed. Routine, nothing unusual. Just another bridge on just another convoy route they had run a dozen times before. Mara's hands tightened on the wheel. Something was wrong. She could feel it the way she used to feel weather changes back home. A pressure in the air that meant storms were coming. The radio crackled one more time. "All vehicles. We have confirmation of hostile movement in sector. Threat level elevated to moderate. Maintain formation and proceed with caution." Mara's heart kicked against her ribs. Moderate threat. That meant possible contact. That meant the next few minutes could turn from routine to chaos in the space of a heartbeat. She glanced at Mendez. He had gone pale, his knuckles white where they gripped his rifle. "You good?" she asked quietly. Yeah, I am good." He was lying, but that was fine. Everyone lied about being scared. It was expected. The convoy rolled toward the bridge. Mara watched the hills, watched the shadows, watched for anything out of place, any hint of what her instincts were screaming about. And in the locked case back at the FOB, her father's rifle waited, patient and silent, for a moment that might never come. The convoy crossed the bridge without incident. Mara felt the tension drain from her shoulders as the last vehicle cleared the span, felt foolish for letting her instincts override common sense. Nothing had happened. Nothing was going to happen. She was just a driver getting spooked by routine intel chatter, proving Kovac right about women being too emotional for combat roles. Mendez exhaled slowly beside her. "See," he said. "Nothing to worry about." Mara nodded but kept scanning the terrain. Her father had taught her that the absence of an attack did not mean the absence of a threat. It just meant the threat was patient. Back at FOB Spiker that evening, Mara pulled maintenance on her MRAP while the rest of the unit headed for Chow. She preferred the quiet of the motor pool, the simple mechanical logic of checking fluid levels and tire pressure. Vehicles did not judge. Vehicles did not care if you were male or female. Vehicles only cared if you took care of them. She was elbow deep in an oil change when Kovac appeared, his shadow falling across the engine block like a threat. "We need to talk, Chun." Mara straightened, wiping her hands on a rag. "About what, Staff Sergeant?" "About the fact that you do not belong here." Kovac crossed his arms, his face hard in the fading light. "I have been patient. I have given you every chance to prove yourself. But today confirmed what I already knew. You second-guess orders. You let fear dictate your actions. You are a liability." "I requested reduced speed based on elevated threat assessment," Mara said evenly. "That is not fear. That is tactical awareness. That is insubordination dressed up in fancy words." Kovac stepped closer. "I have filed a formal request to have you transferred to a support role. Something more appropriate for your skill set. Maybe admin. Maybe the DFAC. Somewhere you cannot get my soldiers killed." The words landed like punches, but Mara kept her face neutral. She had learned early that showing pain only encouraged bullies. "Is there anything else, Staff Sergeant?" "Yeah. Stop pretending you are something you're not. You're not a combat soldier. You are a diversity checkbox who got lucky enough to pass a driving test. Know your limitations." He walked away before she could respond, his boots crunching on gravel. Mara stood motionless for a long moment, her hands clenched around the oil-stained rag. The fury burned hot in her chest, but beneath it was something colder. The knowledge that Kovac was not entirely wrong. She was pretending. She was hiding who she really was, what she was really capable of, because facing that truth meant facing everything she had lost. That night in her bunk, Mara pulled out the notebook she kept hidden under her mattress. Page after page of calculations, wind formulas, ballistic coefficients, range estimations. The mathematics of precision shooting, the language her father had taught her before she could write in cursive. She ran her fingers over the numbers, remembering the way his voice had sounded explaining trajectory, explaining drift, explaining patience. "You have a gift, Mara," he had told her when she was 16 and had just put 3 rounds through the same hole at 800 yards. "Not many people can do what you do. Do not waste it." But what good was a gift if using it meant confronting the fact that he was gone? What good was skill if it only reminded her of everything she had lost? Mendez found her in the chow hall the next morning, his tray piled high with powdered eggs and something that might have been bacon in a previous life. "Mind if I sit?" Mara gestured to the empty chair across from her. "Free country." "Sort of." Mendez sat, pushed his eggs around with a fork. "I heard about Kovac. About the transfer request. Word travels fast. He is wrong, you know. You are a good driver. Better than good. You see things other people miss." Mara sipped her coffee, which tasted like motor oil and regret. Seeing things does not matter if nobody listens. Then make them listen. Mendez leaned forward, his voice dropping. "I know you are more than what you show them. I do not know your whole story, but I know when somebody is holding back. My older sister was like that. Joined the army to prove something to our father, spent 2 years pretending to be less than she was because she was scared of being too much." Mara met his eyes. What happened to her? She stopped pretending. Made sergeant in 3 years. Became the person she was supposed to be all along. Mendez smiled. "I am just saying, sometimes the people trying to make you smaller are the ones who are scared of how big you could be." The words settled into Mara like stones, heavy and uncomfortable. She wanted to tell him he was wrong, that she was not holding back, that this was all she was. But the lies stuck in her throat. 2 days later, the battalion commander called an all-hands briefing. Major Holbrook stood at the front of the crowded tent, his face grim under the harsh fluorescent lights. "Listen up. We have a situation developing at Combat Outpost Valor. They are running critically low on medical supplies, ammunition, and food. Weather has grounded air resupply for the past 72 hours. We're putting together a ground convoy to get them what they need." He paused, scanning the assembled soldiers. "This is not a routine run. Intel suggests increased insurgent activity along the route. We will have armed escort, but I need my best drivers on this mission. Chun, you are taking lead vehicle. Mara felt every head in the tent swivel toward her, felt the weight of judgment and skepticism pressing down like physical force, felt Kovac's glare burning into the side of her face. Sir, Kovac stood up. With respect, I recommend assigning a more experienced driver to lead. Chun has only been in country for 3 months. Chun has a perfect safety record and the highest vehicle maintenance scores in the unit, Holbrook said flatly. She is leading. Kovac, you will be running security. Any other concerns? Silence. Good. We roll out at 0600 tomorrow. Dismissed. That night, Mara sat on her bunk and stared at the locked rifle case under her rack. She had not opened it in 2 years, had not touched the weapon her father had spent 3 months building specifically for her, calibrated to her eye, her breathing, her heartbeat. Inside that case was everything she used to be, everything she had walked away from when the cancer took him and left her alone with skills that no longer had purpose. Her hands moved before her conscious mind gave permission. She pulled out the case, set it on her bunk, worked the combination lock her father had installed. The lid opened with a soft click. The rifle lay there, still perfect, still waiting. Custom Remington 700 with a Macmillan stock. Leupold scope mounted and zeroed. Threaded barrel for a suppressor she had never used. Every surface was exactly as she remembered, down to the small scratch on the stock where she had dropped it during a competition when she was 17. Mara lifted the weapon, felt its familiar weight settle into her hands like coming home. She worked the bolt, smooth and precise. Checked the scope, the action, the trigger pull. Everything was perfect. Everything was ready. Everything was waiting for a version of herself she had buried in Montana dirt. She set the rifle back in its case and locked it again. Tomorrow she would drive. Tomorrow she would do her job and ignore Kovac's contempt and prove nothing to nobody. Tomorrow she would be exactly what they expected her to be. Just a driver. Nothing more. Mendez caught her before lights out, his face worried. You okay, Chun? You look like you are carrying the world. Mara forced a smile. Just thinking about tomorrow. Big mission. You will do fine. You always do. Mendez hesitated. Can I ask you something personal? Depends on the question. Why did you really come to Iraq? And do not give me that line about understanding your father. I can tell there is more to it. Mara was quiet for a long time. Because I made him a promise, she said finally. Right before he died. I promised I would serve. I promised I would honor what he taught me. I just did not promise how. What did he teach you? Everything, Mara said softly. He taught me everything. She walked away before Mendez could ask what everything meant, before she had to explain that her father had been Gunnery Sergeant Thomas Chun, Marine Scout sniper with 43 confirmed kills across 2 deployments. Before she had to explain that she had grown up on rifle ranges and windswept hills, learning to read mirage and calculate Coriolis effect before she learned algebra. Before she had to explain that she could put a bullet through a man-sized target at distances that would make most soldiers laugh in disbelief. Before she had to explain that being just the driver was easier than being her father's daughter. The night passed slowly. Mara lay in her bunk and listened to the sounds of the FOB settling into darkness. Somewhere in the distance, helicopters thrummed. Closer, soldiers talked in low voices. Beneath it all, her father's voice whispered in her memory. You're going to do great things, Mara. Do not let fear make you small. But he had been wrong. Fear was not what made her small. Grief was. Loss was. The unbearable weight of carrying skills that would never again matter to the person who had given them to her. At Ofavethity, Mara was already in the motor pool, running final checks on her MRAP. Everything was perfect. Everything was ready. 14 vehicles lined up in formation, locked and loaded, waiting for the word. Kovac appeared beside her vehicle, his face unreadable in the pre-dawn darkness. Do not screw this up, Chun. People are counting on you. I know, Staff Sergeant. Do you? Because if something goes wrong, if you freeze up or panic or do any of the things I think you're going to do, it is not just you who pays the price. It is every soldier in this convoy. Mara met his eyes. I will get them there safely. That is my job. That is what I do. We will see, Kovacs said, and walked away. At 0600 exactly, Major Holbrook gave the order. Convoy, move out. Mara keyed the ignition, felt the MRAP rumble to life beneath her. Mendez settled into the passenger seat, his rifle across his lap, his face pale but determined. Here we go, he said quietly. Here we go, Mara echoed, and pointed the convoy toward the rising sun and whatever waited in the distance. The convoy moved through the desert like a metal snake. 14 vehicles stretched across 2 kilometers of highway that cut through terrain older than civilization. Mara kept her speed steady at 45 miles per hour, her eyes constantly moving between the road ahead and the mirrors showing the vehicles behind. Everything was procedure. Everything was routine. Everything felt wrong. The sun climbed higher, turning the interior of the MRAP into an oven. Sweat rolled down Mara's back beneath her body armor, but she kept her hands light on the wheel, kept her breathing controlled. Her father had taught her that tension traveled through your body into whatever you were holding. A tense shooter missed. A tense driver made mistakes. Stay loose, Mara. Control your breathing. Control follows. Mendez shifted beside her, adjusting his rifle for the 100th time. How far to the outpost? Another 90 kilometers. 2 hours if nothing goes wrong. And if something goes wrong, then we adapt. Mara glanced at him. You have done convoy ops before, right? Twice. Both times nothing happened. Mendez tried to smile, hoping for 3 out of 3. The radio crackled. All vehicles. This is actual. Intel update. Enemy activity confirmed in grid squares to our north and east. Route remains clear, but stay alert. Kovac, sound off security status. Security posture green. Kovac's voice came back. Gunner scanning. Spacing maintained. Chun is holding steady speed. The words were professional, but Mara heard the subtext. Chun is doing what she is supposed to do. For now, we will see how long that lasts. 30 minutes later, the terrain changed. The flat desert gave way to rolling hills dotted with rocky outcroppings and dried stream beds. The kind of terrain that offered 1,000 hiding places. The kind of terrain that made Mara's instinct scream. She found herself calculating fields of fire without meaning to. That ridge to the east provided clear sight lines to the road. The Wadi system to the west offered covered approaches. If she were planning an ambush, she would position spotters on the high ground and assault elements in the low ground. Classical shaped ambush. Textbook tactics. Stop it, she told herself. You're a driver, not a tactician, not your father's daughter, just a driver. But the calculations kept coming, automatic as breathing. Range to Eastern Ridge, approximately 800 meters. Western Wadi, 400 meters. Wind coming from the south at maybe 8 to 10 miles per hour. Temperature rising, creating mirage that would complicate long shots. Her mind cataloged it all, filed it away, prepared for a fight she had no business preparing for. The convoy approached a small village. Mud brick buildings clustered along the road like brown teeth. Major Holbrook's voice came over the radio. Reduce speed to 30. Stay sharp through the village. Mara eased off the accelerator. Scanned the buildings for movement, for anything out of place. A few locals watched from doorways, their faces carefully neutral. Children played in the dust. An old man sat in the shade, smoking. Normal. Everything looked normal. They cleared the village without incident. The road stretched ahead again, empty and shimmering in the heat. Mara's shoulders began to relax slightly. That was when she saw it. Just a flash of light from the eastern ridge, there and gone so fast, she almost convinced herself she had imagined it. Sunlight reflecting off glass, or metal, or a scope. Her heart kicked hard against her ribs. She keyed her mic. Actual, this is lead. Possible glint on eastern ridge, grid 77438. Say again, lead. Possible observation post, eastern ridge. Request permission to increase speed. Negative, lead. Maintain current pace. Kovac, check it out. There was a pause. Then Kovac's voice, tight with irritation. I see no glint. I see no movement. Chun, you need to settle down. Mara's hands tightened on the wheel. I saw something, Staff Sergeant. You saw sunlight on a rock. Stop jumping at shadows and drive the vehicle. The radio clicked off. Mara forced herself to breathe slowly, forced the tension out of her shoulders. Maybe Kovac was right. Maybe she was seeing threats that did not exist. Maybe the weight of responsibility was making her paranoid. But her father's voice whispered in the back of her mind. Trust your eyes, Mara. If you saw it, you saw it. Do not let anyone convince you otherwise. Mendez glanced over at her. I believe you, for what it is worth. Thanks. But believing me does not change anything if command thinks I am paranoid. The convoy rolled on. 15 minutes passed. Then 20. Nothing happened. The eastern ridge remained silent and still. Mara began to feel foolish, began to think Kovac was right about her being too emotional, too quick to imagine danger. Then the radio erupted with noise. All vehicles, we have confirmation of enemy movement. Multiple personnel observe on Eastern Ridge and in Western Wadi. This is not a drill. Gunners' weapons hot. Drivers maintain formation and speed. Mara's breath caught. She had been right. She had seen the glint. She had called it out. And Kovac had dismissed her. Something hot and angry flared in her chest, but she pushed it down. No time for vindication. No time for anything except doing her job and keeping everyone alive. The convoy accelerated slightly, not running, but moving with purpose. Mara kept her spacing perfect, kept her speed steady, kept scanning for threats. The gunners in the turrets swiveled their weapons, tracking the high ground. Lead, be advised, possible IED reported on route ahead. Slow to 20 and stay center of road. Mara complied, her eyes searching the asphalt for disturbances, for anything that looked wrong. The road curved ahead, following the natural contour of a dry riverbed. And that was when she saw the bridge. It was smaller than the one they had crossed that morning, just a simple concrete span over a wadi that probably ran with water a few weeks out of the year. But something about it made every alarm in Mara's head go off at once. The approach was too perfect. The sight lines were too clear. The wadi offered too much cover. If she were planning an ambush, this is exactly where she would do it. This is lead. Request alternate route. This bridge is a perfect kill zone. Negative, lead. This is the only route. No alternates available. Proceed with caution. Sir, I strongly advise we find another way. There is no other way, Chun. Major Holbrook's voice was firm, but not unkind. We are committed. Take it slow and stay alert. Mara's hands were slick with sweat inside her gloves. Every instinct screamed at her to stop, to turn around, to refuse. But she was a sergeant, not a commander. She was a driver, not a tactician. Her job was to follow orders. She approached the bridge at 15 miles per hour, her eyes scanning everything. The wadi below, the ridges on either side, the bridge itself, looking for wires, for disturbances in the dirt, for anything that would give away an ambush. Mendez had gone completely silent beside her, his breathing shallow and fast. The front wheels touched the bridge. The structure felt solid beneath them. Mara kept moving, smooth and steady, fighting every urge to floor the accelerator and sprint across. Halfway across. 3/4. Almost there. The rear wheels left the bridge and touched solid ground on the far side. Mara exhaled slowly. Lead is across, she reported. Copy, lead. Second vehicle. Proceed. One by one, the vehicles crossed. Each time, Mara watched in her mirror, watched for the flash of an explosion, for the eruption of gunfire. But the bridge remained quiet. The wadi remained empty. Maybe she had been wrong. Maybe her instincts were rusty, corrupted by 2 years of refusing to use them. Maybe Kovac was right, and she was just a paranoid driver seeing threats in every shadow. Last vehicle, clear the bridge. The convoy regrouped on the far side, continuing down the road at increased speed now that the choke point was behind them. Kovac's voice came over the radio, directed at her vehicle specifically. See, Chun, sometimes a bridge is just a bridge. Try not to call in false alarms. It makes the real threats harder to identify. Mara did not respond, just kept driving, kept scanning, kept doing her job while swallowing the bitter taste of being dismissed. 30 minutes later, the convoy was moving through more open terrain when the radio crackled with a new voice. Actual, this is Overwatch. We have eyes on enemy forces repositioning. Approximately 20 personnel moving to intercept convoy route. They're setting up in grid 77 for Twaferon. Mara's hands tightened on the wheel. That grid was less than 5 kilometers ahead, right where the road narrowed through a rocky pass. All vehicles, increase speed to 50. We're going to push through before they can set up. Drivers, maintain tight formation. Mara pressed the accelerator. The MRAP surged forward, the engine roaring. Around her, the convoy tightened up, vehicles moving faster now, racing against time and terrain and an enemy that was somewhere ahead, waiting. Mendez chambered around, his face pale but set. If this goes bad, he said quietly, what do I do? You stay low and you trust me to drive us out of it, Mara said. That is all you can do. What will you do? Mara thought about the rifle locked in its case back at the FOB. Thought about the thousands of rounds she had fired in training. Thought about everything her father had taught her. My job, she said. I will do my job. The rocky pass loomed ahead, the road narrowing to barely 2 lanes between steep hillsides covered in boulders and scrub. Perfect embûche terrain. Exactly what the enemy wanted. The convoy plunged into the pass at full speed, engines screaming, dust billowing behind them. Mara's world narrowed to the road ahead and the vehicles beside her and the growing certainty that everything was about to go very wrong very fast. All units, enemy contact imminent. Prepare for engagement. Mara's breath came steady despite the hammering of her heart. Her hands were rock solid on the wheel. Whatever happened next, she would be ready. She had trained for this her entire life. She just hoped she remembered how. The convoy burst through the rocky pass at 53 miles per hour, and nothing happened. No gunfire, no explosions, just dust and engine noise and the pounding of Mara's heart against her ribs. She kept her foot steady on the accelerator, kept scanning the hillsides, kept waiting for the world to explode. 1 kilometer through the pass. Then 2. The rocky walls began to open up, revealing wider terrain beyond. The convoy maintained speed, vehicles tight in formation, gunners scanning with weapons ready. All units, Overwatch reports enemy forces have not engaged. They appear to be holding position. Maintain speed and clear the area. Mara's shoulders remained locked with tension. Something felt wrong about this. Enemy forces do not reposition to intercept a convoy and then just let it pass. They were waiting for something. Or they had moved to a different position, or this was never the real ambush site. Her mind raced through possibilities, calculating angles and approaches the way her father had taught her. If I want to hit a convoy that knew I was coming, where would I set up? Not in the obvious choke point. Somewhere after. Somewhere they would relax. Somewhere they would think they were safe. Kovac's voice cut through her thoughts. Good job maintaining formation through the pass, drivers. Chun, you did not panic. Progress. The words should have felt like acknowledgement. Instead, they felt like condescension wrapped in false praise. Mara, Ketermike. Thank you, Staff Sergeant. Maybe I was wrong about you freezing under pressure. Maybe you can handle this after all. Mara did not respond. Let him think what he wanted. She had more important things to focus on, like the fact that her instincts were still screaming that danger was close. Mendez finally exhaled, lowering his rifle slightly. That was intense. Thought for sure we were going to get hit back there. We still might. Mara kept her eyes moving. Just because we clear the pass does not mean we are safe. You really do not relax, do you? My father used to say that relaxing in a combat zone is how you end up dead. Mara shifted her grip on the wheel. Stay alert until you are back inside the wire. Even then, stay alert. Sounds exhausting. It is, but it keeps you alive. The convoy rolled into more open terrain, the road straightening out across a broad plain dotted with scattered rocks and dried vegetation. The kind of ground that offered no cover, no concealment. The kind of ground that should have felt safer. Mara's unease grew stronger. Too open, too exposed, Too perfect for long-range observation. Her mind automatically calculated distances. If someone were watching from that low ridge to the north, they would have clear sight lines for at least 3 kilometers. If they had a decent scope, they could count the rivets on the vehicles. If they had a radio, they could call in positions to forces elsewhere. Stop it, she told herself again. You're not a scout. You're not your father. You're just a driver who needs to stop seeing ghosts. But the ghosts would not go away. They whispered in her father's voice, patient and insistent. Pay attention, Mara. The enemy gets a vote. They're planning something. Figure out what. She scanned the terrain with new intensity, looking for what did not belong. A vehicle that should not be there. A reflection of glass. Movement where there should be none. Anything. This is lead. Requesting permission to increase speed to 60. I do not like how exposed we are. Negative lead. Maintain current speed. We're not racing across a rock. We are projecting confidence and control. Mara wanted to argue that projecting confidence was meaningless if you projected it straight into an ambush. But she was learning that being right did not matter if nobody wanted to hear it. The convoy maintained its steady pace. 45 miles per hour across open ground. Professional. Disciplined. Predictable. Predictable was dangerous. Mendez shifted in his seat, checking his rifle for the 3rd time in as many minutes. Can I ask you something personal? Depends on the question. Your father, the one who taught you to drive, was he deployed here? Mara was quiet for a moment, weighing how much truth to offer. He was. 2 tours. Came back different both times. Different how? Quieter. Like he had seen things he could not talk about. Done things he could not forget. Mara kept her eyes on the road. He never really told me what it was like. Just taught me skills. Like if I knew what he knew, maybe I would understand without him having to explain. Did it work? Do you understand? No. Mara's voice was soft. I understand the skills. I do not understand what using them did to him. Maybe that is a good thing. Maybe some things are better not understood. Maybe. The convoy rolled on. The sun climbed higher, baking the desert into shimmering stillness. Mara's shirt was soaked with sweat beneath her armor. Her hands ached from gripping the wheel. Her eyes burned from constant scanning. And then she saw it again. Another flash of light, this time from the northern ridge. There for half a second, then gone. This is lead. Glint on northern ridge. Grid 77625-3. There was a pause. Then Kovac's voice, edged with irritation. Chun, I'm looking at that ridge right now. There is nothing there. Staff Sergeant, I saw a reflection. You saw heat shimmer. You saw mirage. You saw your own paranoia. Kovac's voice hardened. Stop calling in false contacts. You're making the real gunners jumpy. Mara's jaw clenched. It was not heat shimmer. It was glass or metal or something reflective. She knew the difference. She had spent years learning to read terrain through a scope, learning to distinguish real threats from environmental noise. But she was just a driver, and the driver's opinion on threat assessment did not matter. Copy, Staff Sergeant, she said through gritted teeth. Mendez looked over at her. I believe you saw something. Believing me does not change anything if they think I am crying wolf. Then stop telling them what you see. Just react if something happens. Mara shook her head. That is how people die. You see a threat, you call it in. Even if nobody listens. Even if it gets you labeled paranoid. Even then, the convoy continued across the open plain. 20 minutes passed without incident. Then 30. Mara began to wonder if Kovac was right. If she was seeing threats that did not exist. If 2 years away from her training had corrupted her judgment. But the knot in her stomach would not loosen. Something was wrong. Something was coming. She could feel it the way animals feel earthquakes before they hit. All units, be advised. Overwatch has lost visual on enemy forces. Last known position was Grid 77 for Twaferone, but they are no longer there. Assume they have repositioned. Stay alert. The radio went quiet. Every vehicle in the convoy seemed to tighten up, gunners swiveling their weapons more rapidly, scanning for threats that could be anywhere. Mara's mind raced. 20 personnel do not just disappear. They move. They reposition. They find better ground. If she were moving those forces, where'd she go? Not behind the convoy. That gave up the advantage. not to the flanks in this open terrain. That left them exposed. Forward. She would move them forward, to a place where the convoy would have to slow down or stop. A place with cover and concealment and multiple escape routes. Her eyes locked on the terrain ahead. 3 kilometers distant, the road began to curve around a series of low hills. Not dramatic terrain, but enough to break sight lines. Enough to hide forces in the dead ground behind the hills. That is where I would go, she thought. That is where I would set the trap. She keyed her mic actual, request permission to reduce speed approaching the curve ahead. Terrain offers ideal ambush positions. Chun, Kovac cut in before the commander could respond. Stop second-guessing the route. We have driven this road a dozen times. There is nothing special about that curve. With respect, Staff Sergeant, we have never driven it with confirmed enemy forces actively maneuvering against us. We also have never driven it with a driver who sees an ambush behind every rock. Kovac's voice carried an edge of mockery. Just drive, Chun. Let the professionals handle threat assessment. The words hit like a slap. Profesionales. As if her training did not count. As if her years learning from a Marine Scout sniper meant nothing, because she had chosen to be a driver instead of following in his footsteps. Mara's hands tightened on the wheel until her knuckles went white. She wanted to key the mic and tell Kovac exactly what kind of professional she was. Wanted to explain that she could read terrain better than half the scouts in the battalion. Wanted to prove that her instincts were not paranoia, but hard-earned skill. But she swallowed it all, buried it deep, because proving herself meant revealing herself. And revealing herself meant confronting everything she had been running from for 2 years. The convoy approached the curve. Mara reduced speed slightly anyway, just enough to buy reaction time. Just enough to go against Kovac's dismissal in the smallest way possible. Mendez gripped his rifle tighter. How bad is this going to be? I do not know, Mara said honestly. But stay low and hold on. The lead vehicle entered the curve. The road bent around the first hill, sight lines collapsing from kilometers to meters. Mara's every sense screamed warning. And then the world turned to fire and thunder and screaming metal as the IED detonated under the third vehicle in the convoy, the explosion tearing through the afternoon like the fist of an angry god. The explosion lifted the third vehicle off the ground and dropped it on its side like a discarded toy. Mara felt the shock wave slam into her MRAP, felt the vehicle shudder, heard Mendez shouting something she could not process over the ringing in her ears. Training took over. She yanked the wheel hard right, moving off the road to give the vehicles behind maneuvering room, and slammed the transmission into park. Contact IED. Third vehicle down, she heard someone screaming over the radio. Multiple casualties. We need medevac now. The world sharpened into crystal clarity. Smoke billowed from the overturned MRAP. The vehicle behind it had stopped hard, soldiers already dismounting. And from the hills on both sides of the road, muzzle flashes erupted like deadly fireflies. All units, we are under fire. Return fire and establish security perimeter. Kovac's voice cut through the chaos, steady and professional. Gunners engage targets on the high ground. Drivers stay with vehicles. Mara's hands moved automatically, grabbing her rifle, checking her body armor. Beside her, Mendez was pale but focused, his weapon up and tracking toward the hills. Chun, I said stay with your vehicle. Kovac barked over the radio. Mara keyed her mic Roger, staying with vehicle. But her eyes were already scanning the hillsides, already calculating ranges and wind and angles of fire. The insurgent positions were good. High ground on both flanks, maybe 400 meters to the west, 800 to the east. Classical-shaped ambush, exactly what she had been afraid of. The gunners in the turrets opened up, 50 caliber rounds hammering toward the hills. But the insurgents were in cover, behind rocks and in defilade positions. The return fire was heavy, but largely ineffective, bullets cracking overhead, but not finding targets. Mara watched the pattern of fire, watched where the muzzle flashes originated, watched how the insurgents moved between shots. They were trained, disciplined, not the usual poorly organized fighters. These men knew what they were doing. The radio crackled with controlled chaos. Third vehicle has 4 wounded, 2 critical. We need to extract them now. Negative, we are pinned down. Air support is 20 minutes out. Hold position and suppress enemy fire. 20 minutes, Mara thought. 20 minutes was a lifetime in a firefight. 20 minutes was how long it took for wounded soldiers to bleed out. She looked at the eastern hillside, at the positions that were pouring the most effective fire into the convoy. 800 meters. Maybe 850 with the elevation change. Difficult shots, but not impossible. Not for someone who had been making those shots since she was 16 years old. Her father's voice whispered through the gunfire. You see the problem, Mara. Now what are you going to do about it? Nothing, she told herself. I am a driver. I stay with my vehicle. I follow orders. But soldiers were dying, and she had the skills to stop it. Mendez grabbed her arm. Chin, what are you thinking? I know that look. I am thinking those positions on the East Ridge are the ones doing the most damage. Okay, so if someone could suppress them, the convoy could maneuver to extract the wounded. We have gunners doing that right now. Mara shook her head. The 50s do not have the range or accuracy. They're just making noise. We need precision fire at distance. We do not have a designated marksman. Martinez got hit in the explosion. Mara's jaw clenched. She looked at Mendez, then at the hills, then at the overturned vehicle where soldiers were screaming for help. The math was simple. Either she revealed who she really was, or people died. There was no middle ground. I need to get something from the FOB, she said quietly. We are not at the FOB, Chun. We are in the middle of a firefight. I know. Mara pulled out her personal kit bag from behind her seat, opened it, and withdrew the soft case she had been carrying since the convoy left. Inside was not her father's custom rifle. That was still locked away at base. This was her backup weapon, a Remington 700 SBS Tactical with a Vortex Viper scope. Not as refined as her father's build, but more than adequate for what she needed to do. Mendez stared. Where did that come from? I always carry it. Mara pulled the rifle free, checked the chamber, verified the scope mounts. Just in case. Just in case of what? Mendez's voice was rising. Chin, what are you doing? My job. Mara grabbed 2 boxes of match-grade ammunition from a bag. Tell Kovac I am taking a position to provide overwatch. He is going to lose his mind. Probably. Mara, chamber round, feeling the familiar click of the bolt sliding home. But he can yell at me after I keep those wounded soldiers alive. She was out of the vehicle before Mendez could argue further, moving low and fast toward a cluster of rocks 30 meters from the road. The position offered decent cover and a clear sight line to the eastern ridge. Not perfect, but it would have to do. Behind her, she heard Mendez keying the radio. Staff Sergeant Kovac, you need to know that Chun just grabbed a rifle I have never seen before and is setting up a shooting position. What? Kovac's voice exploded over the radio. Chun, get back to your vehicle right now. Mara ignored him. She was already settling into her shooting position, rifle braced on a rock, scope coming up to her eye. The world narrowed to the circle of glass, to the magnified image of the hillside 800 meters distant. There, 2 insurgents behind a boulder cluster, one with an RPG, one with a rifle. They were the primary threat to the down vehicle. Take them out, and the convoy could move. Chun, I gave you a direct order. Return to your vehicle immediately. Mara tuned out Kovac's voice, tuned out everything except the fundamentals her father had drilled into her 10,000 times. Breathing, trigger control, wind reading, range estimation. She checked the mirage rising off the desert floor, estimated wind speed at 7 miles per hour from the south, dialed elevation into her scope, adjusted for the cant of her rifle. The insurgent with the RPG shifted position, preparing to fire. 3 seconds until he launched. 2 seconds. 1. Mara's finger pressed the trigger. The rifle bucked against her shoulder. The familiar crack of the shot echoed across the desert. 800 meters away, the insurgent with the RPG dropped like a puppet with cut strings. The second insurgent froze, confused, looking around for the source of the shot. Mara worked the bolt, chambered another round, acquired the target, pressed the trigger. The second man fell. The radio went silent. Complete shock silence. Then Kovac's voice, strangled and disbelieving. What the hell was that? Mara did not answer. She was already scanning for the next threat. Found a cluster of 3 fighters in a different position, 600 meters out. They were firing down at the convoy with AK-47s, their rounds stitching the dirt around the wounded vehicle. She took the first one with a shot to center mass. Worked a bolt. Took the second before he could process what was happening. The third tried to run. She led him by 2 feet and dropped him mid-stride. Chun! Kovac's voice had changed completely. Who the hell are you? Mara acquired another target. Fired. Reloaded. Fired again. Someone who should have spoken up sooner. Staff Sergeant. The insurgent fire for the Eastern Ridge began to falter. The fighters who remained were going to ground, trying to figure out where the precision fire was coming from. Good. Let them be confused. Let them be scared. Mara shifted her aim to the western positions, closer but still 500 meters out. Harder shots because of the angle, but she had made harder. She found a man crouched behind a rock wall, just his head and rifle visible. Calculated the hold, accounted for the crosswind, squeezed the trigger. The man's rifle clattered down the hillside as he collapsed. Major Holbrook's voice came over the radio, sharp with urgency. Unknown shooter, identify yourself. Sergeant Mara Chun, sir. Driver, first vehicle. Providing precision fire support. Chun, what are your qualifications? Mara fired again. Another insurgent down. My father was Gunnery Sergeant Thomas Chun, Marine Scout Sniper. He trained me from age 12. I have been shooting competitively since I was 14. I can make these shots, sir. There was a pause. Then Holbrook's voice, filled with something between amazement and anger. Then keep making them, Sergeant. All units. Chun has overwatch. Suppress western positions while she clears the East Ridge. The convoy's gunners adjusted their fire, concentrating on the western hills. Mara focused on the eastern positions, methodically eliminating threats one by one. Each shot was a conversation with her father. Each trigger press, a continuation of lessons learned on Montana hillsides. This was what he had trained her for. This was why he had spent years teaching her to read wind and calculate drop and control her breathing under stress. This was who she really was. 5 targets down. 8. 12. The insurgent fire slackened dramatically as the fighters on the eastern ridge either died or retreated. The pressure on the convoy eased enough for soldiers to rush forward and begin extracting the wounded from the overturned vehicle. Mara kept shooting, kept scanning, kept doing what she had been born to do. And in the back of her mind, beneath the focus and the adrenaline and the cold efficiency of trained violence, she heard her father's voice one more time. There's my girl. I knew you would remember. The ambush broke. The surviving insurgents melted away into the hills, their attack shattered by a threat they had not anticipated. A single shooter who could reach out across impossible distances and touch them with precision they could not match. The convoy began to reorganize. Medevac birds were inbound. The wounded were being stabilized. And Mara Chun, the driver who was just supposed to stay with her vehicle and follow orders, had just saved the entire convoy with skills nobody knew she possessed. Kovac appeared beside her position, his face unreadable. We need to talk, Chun. Right now. Mara lowered her rifle and turned to face Kovac. His expression was a complicated mixture of shock, anger, and something that might have been respect struggling to break through years of certainty. She had spent 3 months under his command being dismissed as inadequate, and now she had just demonstrated skills that most of his security team could not match. 12 confirmed kills, Staff Sergeant. Mara's voice was steady. Eastern Ridge is clear. Western positions are suppressed. Convoy can maneuver. Kovac stared at her like she had just spoken a foreign language. Where did you learn to shoot like that? Montana. My father's ranch. Started when I was 12. That does not explain anything, Chun. Kovac gestured at the hillside where bodies lay scattered among the rocks. Those were shots at 800 meters plus. Under combat stress. With a rifle I have never seen you carry. You made those shots like you have been doing this your entire life. I have been, Mara said quietly, just not in uniform. Major Holbrook appeared, jogging over from the command vehicle. His face was grim, but his eyes held a sharp intelligence that made Mara straighten her posture. Chun, I need a full explanation. Right now. Mara met his gaze without flinching. Sir, my father was Gunnery Sergeant Thomas Chun. He served 2 tours as a Marine Scout sniper, one in Fallujah and one in Helmand Province. After he retired, he trained me. Competition shooting at first, then long-range precision work. By the time I was 17, I was competing at national-level matches and placing top 5. Holbrook's eyes narrowed. And you enlisted as a driver. Why? Because when my father died 2 years ago, I promised I would serve. Mara's voice remained controlled, but something beneath it cracked slightly. I just could not face Scout Sniper School without him, so I chose a different path. I thought I could honor his memory without becoming him. By hiding your skills, Holbrook said flatly. By letting us think you were just a competent driver when you were actually one of the most qualified shooters in this battalion. Mara had no response to that. It was the truth, stark and undeniable. Kovac stepped forward, his face flushed. Sir, with respect, this is a serious breach of trust. Chun has been lying to us for 3 months, withholding information about her capabilities, making us think she was something she is not. She also just saved 12 lives, Kovac. Holbrook's voice was sharp, including yours. I watched her drop targets our gunners could not touch. I watched her break an ambush that could have destroyed this convoy. So before you start talking about breaches of trust, maybe consider what just happened. Sir, I understand that, but we have a right to know who we are serving with. What else is she hiding? Nothing, Mara said. There is nothing else. I can shoot. That is the only secret I have been keeping. Holbrook studied her for a long moment. What was your longest confirmed shot in competition? 1,467 meters. Wind was gusting 12 to 15 miles per hour. I placed first in my division. And in combat. Just now, what was your longest shot? 873 meters. The man with the RPG on the eastern ridge. Holbrook whistled softly. Chun, do you understand what you have done here? You have just demonstrated capabilities we desperately need. We have 3 designated marksmen in the battalion, and one of them is currently on a medevac bird with a collapsed lung. We need shooters like you. I'm a driver, sir. You were a driver. Holbrook's voice held finality. As of right now, you are whatever I need you to be. And what I need is someone who can make impossible shots when our backs are against the wall. Mara felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. This was what she had been avoiding. This was why she had hidden her skills, buried her training, chosen to be less than she was. Because once people knew what she could do, they would ask her to do it. And doing it meant confronting everything she had lost. Sir, I request permission to continue serving as a driver. Request denied. Holbrook's expression softened slightly. Chun, I know this is not what you planned. I know you have your reasons for keeping your head down. But we are in a war zone and soldiers are dying because we do not have enough qualified shooters. You have a gift. Your father gave it to you. And right now, I'm ordering you to use it. The words hit harder than Mara expected. Your father gave it to you. She looked down at the rifle in her hands, at the weapon that was nothing compared to the custom build her father had made for her. The rifle still locked in its case back at the FOB, waiting for her to be ready to carry it. Maybe she would never be ready. Maybe that was the point. Yes, sir, she said quietly. Good. Holbrook turned to Kovac. Staff Sergeant, I want a full inventory of Chin's equipment and capabilities. Find out what else she has been carrying. And I want her shooting scores documented and sent up the chain. Someone at Regiment needs to know we have a natural sniper driving supply trucks. Kovac's jaw was tight, but he nodded. Yes, sir. The major walked away, already keying his radio to coordinate the medevac and reorganization of the convoy. Mara and Kovac stood in uncomfortable silence for a moment, the sound of distant helicopters growing louder. I was wrong about you, Kovac said finally. His voice was rough, like the words were being dragged out against his will. I thought you were weak. Thought you were a liability. Thought having you in the convoy was a mistake. You were not completely wrong, Mara said. I was hiding. I was being less than I could be. That is its own kind of weakness. No, Kovac shook his head. I was wrong because I judged you without knowing you. I assumed incompetence because of prejudice. That is on me, not you. What you did today, those shots you made, that was not weakness. That was elite-level marksmanship under the worst possible conditions. Mara met his eyes. I should have told you. Should have told everyone. Maybe if I had, Martinez would not have been the only designated marksman in that vehicle. Maybe things would have been different. Or maybe you would have been in that vehicle instead of him, Kovac said. We do not get to play Watif. We deal with what is. Mendez jogged over, his face split in a grin that looked almost manic. Chun, that was the most incredible thing I have ever seen. Seriously, where have you been hiding that? In plain sight, Mara said. Just nobody was looking. Well, I'm looking now. Mendez's enthusiasm was infectious. You dropped 12 targets like you were at a shooting range. No hosetaschen, no misses. Just bang, bang, bang. Like you were playing a video game, except with real people. It was not a game, Mara said quietly. Those were human beings, even if they were trying to kill us. Mendez's smile faded. Right? Sorry. I just meant I have never seen shooting like that outside of movies. My father used to say that movies get it wrong. Real precision shooting is not dramatic. It is just math and physics and breathing control. Mara checked her rifle, safed it, started breaking it down. The hard part is not making the shot. The hard part is living with having made it. The medevac helicopters touched down in a swirl of dust and noise. Medics rushed to load the wounded, their movements practiced and efficient. Mara watched them work, counted the stretchers, calculated the cost. 4 wounded. 2 critical. All of them would probably survive now because she had revealed herself. That was the trade. Her secret for their lives. Her comfortable anonymity for the weight of being who her father had trained her to be. She was not sure if it was worth it, but she had made the choice and there was no taking it back. The convoy reorganized over the next 30 minutes. The damaged vehicle was secured for recovery. The formation tightened. The security posture shifted from standard to high alert, and Mara found herself reassigned from lead driver to a position in the middle of the convoy, with orders to have her rifle ready in case they hit more resistance. She sat in the passenger seat now, her rifle across her lap, while Kovac himself took the wheel. The reversal felt surreal. 3 hours ago, he had been questioning her competence. Now he was driving for her. You know what the real kicker is, Kovac said as they rolled out. I spent 3 months trying to get you transferred because I thought you would get someone killed. Turns out you are the reason none of US are dead right now. Irony is not the right word for that, Mara said. No, it is humbling. Kovac glanced at her. For what it is worth, I am sorry. For doubting you. For undermining you. For being blind to who you actually are. I made it easy for you to be blind, Mara said. I was trying to be invisible. Why? I still do not understand why someone with your skills would choose to hide them. Mara was quiet for a long moment, watching the desert roll past. Because every time I pick up a rifle, I hear my father's voice. Every time I make a shot, I remember him teaching me how. And every time I remember him teaching me, I remember that he is gone and I will never hear that voice again except in my own head. Kovac drove in silence, absorbing that. Finally, he said, he would be proud of you. What you did today. Who you are. Maybe. Mara's voice was barely a whisper. Or maybe he would be disappointed that I ran from it for so long. Nobody who saw you shoot today would ever call what you did running. The convoy pushed toward Combat Outpost Valor, the mission continuing despite the violence. They had supplies to deliver and soldiers waiting who needed them. The ambush had delayed them, but not stopped them. As the kilometers rolled past, Mara felt something shifting inside her, a weight she had been carrying for 2 years beginning to lighten. Not disappearing, but becoming bearable. Her father was still gone. That grief was permanent. But maybe honoring his memory did not mean becoming him. Maybe it just meant being willing to use what he had given her. The radio crackled. All units. Overwatch reports no further enemy activity. Route appears clear to destination. Mara checked her rifle anyway. Verified the chamber was clear. The safety engaged. The scope still zeroed. Old habits from a lifetime of training. Kovac noticed. You're not taking any chances. My father used to say that the fight you are ready for is the fight you will survive. Mara settled the rifle across her lap. So I stay ready. Smart man, your father. The best. They drove on through the desert, through the heat and dust and the aftermath of violence. Behind them, the hillside held the evidence of what Mara-chan could do when she stopped hiding. Ahead of them, an uncertain future where her secret was no longer secret and her skills were no longer optional. And somewhere in the space between those 2 points, Mara began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, her father had been preparing her for exactly this moment all along. Combat Outpost Valor sat on a barren hilltop like a defiant middle finger raised at the surrounding desert. Concrete barriers, sandbags, and razor wire formed a perimeter that looked more desperate than secure. The convoy rolled through the gate just as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that reminded Mara of fire. The soldiers at the outpost looked thin and tired, their uniforms dusty and their eyes hollow. They had been isolated for 3 weeks, running low on everything that mattered. The arrival of the convoy brought visible relief to their faces, shoulders straightening slightly as hope returned. Major Holbrook coordinated the offload while Mara sat on the hood of her MRAP, cleaning her rifle with movements so automatic she could do them in her sleep. Kovac approached, carrying 2 bottles of water and a look of uncertainty that seemed foreign on his usually confident face. "Thought you might be thirsty," he said, offering her a bottle. "Thanks." Mara took it, drank deeply. The water was warm, but it cut through the dust, coating her throat. Kovac leaned against the vehicle beside her. "Word is spreading fast about what you did. Half the battalion probably knows by now that the quiet driver is actually some kind of elite shooter. I'm not elite." Mara worked the cleaning rod through her barrel. "I'm just trained. Chun, you dropped 12 targets at ranges most soldiers could not see with binoculars. That is not just trained. That is exceptional." My father would disagree. He always said I rushed my breathing on the 6th and 7th shots. Said I let adrenaline dictate my rhythm instead of controlling it. Your father sounds like he had impossibly high standards. He did. Mara set down the cleaning rod and looked at Kovac. But that is what made me good. He never let me settle for adequate. Never let me make excuses. If I missed a shot, we figured out why and we fixed it. I judged you without knowing you, Kovac said quietly. Made assumptions based on my own prejudice. That was wrong. I was wrong. You were not the first, and you will not be the last, Mara said. I have been underestimated my whole life. Sometimes I wonder if I started hiding because it was easier than constantly proving myself. You proved yourself today. To everyone. Maybe. Mara reassembled her rifle with practiced efficiency. Or maybe I just revealed that I have been lying to everyone for 3 months. Lieutenant Vance jogged over, his radio squawking. Chun, Major wants you at the TOC. Now, Mara grabbed her rifle and followed Vance across the outpost to the Tactical Operations Center, a reinforced concrete bunker that served as the nerve center for the isolated position. Inside, Major Holbrook stood over a map table with Captain Morrison, the outpost commander. Both men looked up as Mara entered. Shingood, Holbrook gestured to the map. We have a problem, and I think you might be our solution. Sir, Morrison pointed to a position marked on the map about 1,500 meters north of the outpost. For the past week, we have been taking sporadic sniper fire from this location. Our counter-sniper team has tried to suppress it, but the shooter is good. Very good. He takes 1 or 2 shots and then disappears before we can get a bead on him. How many casualties? Mara asked. 3 wounded. None killed yet, but it is just a matter of time. Morrison's finger tapped the map. He is patient, disciplined, only shoots when he has a clear target and a clean escape route. Our guys think he's former military, possibly Iraqi Army Special Forces. What do you need from me, sir? Holbrook met her eyes. We need you to find him and eliminate him. You have the skills. You have the equipment. And based on what I saw today, you have the mindset. Mara felt her stomach tighten. Sir, I am a sergeant. I am not a trained military sniper. I am a competitive shooter who learned from my father. There's a difference. Is there? Morrison's voice was hard. Because from where I stand, you just broke an ambush with precision fire that saved an entire convoy. That sounds like military sniper work to me. Competition shooting is controlled, Mara said. Known distances. Predictable conditions. No one shooting back. This is different. You are right. It is different. Holbrook's voice carried weight. It is more important. That shooter out there is targeting my soldiers. And you're the only person in this outpost who has the demonstrated ability to reach out to 1,500 meters and touch someone. Mara looked at the map, at the position marked with red ink. 1,500 meters was at the edge of her effective range, maybe beyond it, depending on conditions. It was not a shot she would take lightly, even on a competition range with perfect weather and all the time in the world. I will need to see the position, she said finally. Study the terrain. Calculate wind and elevation. This is not something I can just do on the fly. You will have whatever you need, Morrison said, and you will have support. We will put together a small team to go with you. No, Mara's voice was firm. If I'm doing this, I'm doing alone. More people means more noise, more movement, more chance of being spotted. If this shooter is as good as you say, he will be watching for a counter-sniper team. So what do you propose? Holbrook asked. I go out before dawn. Take a position with good concealment and sight lines to his suspected location. I wait. I observe. And if he shows himself, I take the shot. Mara traced a route on the map. But I go alone. No support. No backup. Just me and my rifle. Holbrook and Morrison exchange a look. That is asking a lot, Chun. If something goes wrong, you will be isolated out there with no help. I know, sir. But this is how my father taught me. A sniper is most effective when they are invisible. And you cannot be invisible with a squad tagging along. Holbrook studied her for a long moment. If you do this, if you go out there and eliminate this threat, I am putting you in for immediate transfer to Scout Sniper School. No arguments. No hiding. You use these skills and you accept what comes with them. Mara felt the trap closing around her. This was what she had been avoiding. This was the path she had turned away from when her father died. But soldiers were being shot. People were in danger. And she had the ability to stop it. Yes, sir, she said quietly. Good. You leave at 0400. Morrison will brief you on the shooter's patterns and suspected positions. Get some rest. You're going to need it. Mara left the TOC feeling like she had just agreed to jump off a cliff. The weight of it settled on her shoulders, heavy and familiar. This was what her father had trained her for. Not competitions, not trophies. This, the real work of a precision shooter. The burden of holding another person's life in your crosshairs and making the decision to end it. She found Mendez near the DFAC, eating an MRE that looked only slightly more appetizing than cardboard. He looked up as she approached. You okay, Chen? You look like someone just told you bad news. I'm going hunting tomorrow morning. Alone. For an enemy sniper who has been terrorizing this outpost. Mendez choked on his food. What? Why you? Because apparently I am the only one who can make the shot. Mara sat down beside him. And because I was stupid enough to demonstrate my skills instead of keeping my head down. You saved 12 lives today. That is not stupid. No, but it put me right back in the position I was trying to avoid. Mara stared at her hands. My whole life, people have had expectations for me. My father trained me to be exceptional, taught me skills most people will never have. And with those skills came the assumption that I would use them the way he used them, that I would be a warrior like he was. But you did not want to be. I want to be my own person, not just Gunnery Sergeant Chen's daughter, not just someone carrying on a legacy. I wanted to serve on my own terms. And instead you ended up here, Mendez said gently, about to do exactly what your father would have done. Yeah. The irony is not lost on me. They sat in silence for a moment, watching the sun finish its descent. The outpost settled into the familiar rhythms of evening. Soldiers rotating guard shifts, maintenance crews working on vehicles, the constant hum of generators providing power. Can I tell you something? Mendez said. My sister, the one I mentioned before, she told me once that running from your gifts does not make them go away. It just makes you tired. Eventually, you have to stop running and accept who you are. Your sisters sound wise. She is. Also bossy and annoying, but wise. Mendez smiled. Point is, maybe you have been running for 2 years. Maybe today you stopped. And maybe that is okay. Mara wanted to believe that, wanted to think that accepting her skills and using them was some kind of growth instead of surrender. But the grief was still there, sharp and fresh every time she thought about her father. The loss was still a wound that had not healed. "I am scared," she admitted quietly. "Not of the mission, not of the shooter. I am scared that if I become who my father trained me to be, I will lose the last piece of myself that is separate from him." Mendez considered that. "You know what I think? I think you already are separate from him. You are using his training, but you are making your own choices. You are fighting your own fights. That makes you your own person, not his copy." "Maybe. Definitely." Mendez stood up. "Now go get some sleep. You have a sniper to hunt in the morning, and you're going to need to be sharp." Mara nodded, but did not move. She sat watching the stars emerge as darkness claimed the desert, thinking about the shot she would have to make, about the life she might have to take, about the person she was becoming whether she wanted to or not. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. The sound carried across the empty landscape, lonely and wild and free. Mara listened until it faded into silence, then stood and walked toward her assigned bunk. Tomorrow she would become a hunter. Tomorrow she would step fully into the role her father had prepared her for. Tomorrow she would stop being just a driver and become something else entirely. Tonight, she was still herself. Still Mara Chun, who missed her father and carried his lessons and wondered if she would ever be free of his shadow. Tomorrow would come soon enough. Mara woke at 3:30, 30 minutes before her alarm. The bunk room was dark and quiet except for the breathing of sleeping soldiers and the distant hum of generators. She lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling, feeling the familiar pre-mission tension coiling in her stomach. This was different from competition shooting, different from the ambush yesterday, where adrenaline and necessity had overridden thought. This was deliberate, premeditated. She was going out into the darkness to find another human being and kill them from a distance so great they would never know what hit them. Her father's voice whispered through her thoughts. A sniper's greatest weapon is not their rifle, is their mind. You must be calm. You must be certain. You must accept what you are about to do before you take the shot. Mara arose silently and dressed in the dim light. She had spent the previous evening preparing her equipment with obsessive care. Her rifle was cleaned and zeroed. Her ammunition was selected round by round, checking each cartridge for imperfections. Her range card was memorized. She had studied the terrain maps until she could see the landscape in her mind. Now came the hard part, the waiting, the stalking, the patience. She gathered her gear and moved through the outpost like a ghost. The guards on the perimeter barely glanced at her as she approached the northern gate. Morrison had cleared her departure, but the soldiers manning the position still looked uncertain about letting someone walk out into the darkness alone. "You sure about this, Sergeant?" the corporal at the gate asked. "It is real dark out there, real empty." "I will be fine." Mara adjusted her pack. "Just make sure nobody shoots me when I come back. How will we know it is you and not the enemy? I will be the one carrying an American rifle and speaking English." Mara managed a thin smile. "Also, I will radio before I approach." The gate opened with a metallic clang that sounded impossibly loud in the pre-dawn stillness. Mara slipped through and moved into the desert, immediately feeling the temperature difference outside the relative warmth of the outpost. The night air was cold, carrying the mineral smell of ancient stone and dust. She moved slowly, methodically, using the terrain to mask her approach to the position she had selected on the map. A low ridge approximately 800 meters north of the outpost, offering clear sight lines to the suspected enemy position while providing good concealment from observation. It took her 40 minutes to cover the distance, not because it was far, but because she moved with extreme care, checking each step, avoiding anything that might make noise or leave obvious tracks. Her father had taught her that a good stalk was measured in patience, not speed. She reached the ridge as the first hint of gray appeared on the eastern horizon. Perfect timing. She settled into a depression between two large rocks, arranged her ghillie netting to break up her silhouette, and began the process of becoming invisible. The position was good. She had a clear view of the area where the enemy sniper had been operating, marked on her range card as Target Zone Alpha. The distance was approximately 1,470 meters, at the extreme edge of her capability, but possible with the right conditions. Mara set up her rifle with ritualistic precision, bipod deployed and adjusted for height. Rifle positioned for optimal sight picture. Range card placed where she could reference it without moving. She pulled out her ballistic calculator and began running numbers for various scenarios. Temperature, humidity, elevation, wind speed, Coriolis effect. Every variable that could affect a bullet over almost a mile of flight. Then she settled into wait. The sun rose slowly, painting the desert in shades of gold and amber. Mara watched through her scope, scanning the distant terrain, looking for anything that did not belong. A reflection, a shadow that moved wrong, the slightest hint of human presence. Hours passed. The temperature climbed. Sweat rolled down her back beneath her gear. Her muscles began to ache from holding position. This was the part of sniping that movies never showed. The brutal, mind-numbing patience required to wait for a target that might never appear. At Ananetwani, her radio clicked twice. The signal from the outpost that the enemy sniper had been active around this time on previous days. Mara tensed slightly, her focus sharpening. Come on, she thought. Show yourself. Give me something to work with. At Anan 4-3, she saw it. The briefest flash of movement in Target Zone Alpha. Something white, there and gone in an instant. Could have been cloth. Could have been a bird. Could have been nothing. Mara adjusted her scope, focusing on the area. Waited. Watched. 10 minutes later, she saw it again. This time she was certain. A figure in light-colored clothing, moving between rocks. The enemy sniper, taking position for his morning shot at the outpost. Her heart rate increased slightly. She controlled her breathing, forcing herself to remain calm. Observe. Assess. Dichide. The figure settled into a position approximately 1,460 meters from Mara's hide. She could see him through her scope now, a man in traditional Iraqi dress, moving with the confidence of someone who believed himself safe from observation at this distance. He was setting up a rifle. Mara watched as he arranged his position, adjusted his own scope, prepared to take a shot at soldiers in the outpost who would never see it coming. This was the moment, the decision point. She had found her target. She had the shot. Now she had to make the choice her father had made countless times. The choice to end another person's life from a distance. Her hands were steady on the rifle. Her breathing was controlled. Her mind ran through the calculations automatically. Wind speed approximately 6 miles per hour from the west. Temperature 78 degrees. Humidity low. Elevation difference negligible. Coriolis effect minimal at this range, but present. She dialed the adjustments into her scope. The enemy sniper was focused on the outpost, completely unaware of Mara's presence. He would never know she was there, would never have a chance to defend himself. It was not a fair fight, but war was not supposed to be fair. It was supposed to be effective. Mara placed her crosshairs on the target. Center mass, where her father had taught her to aim when the shot mattered most. She controlled her breathing, found her natural respiratory pause, began to apply pressure to the trigger, and hesitated. This was a human being, someone's son, maybe someone's father, a person with a life and a history and people who cared about them. And she was about to end all of that with a single trigger press. Her father's voice spoke in her memory, but this time it was gentler. I know it is hard, Mara. Taking a life is the heaviest burden a soldier can carry. But sometimes that burden is necessary to save other lives. You do not shoot because you want to. You shoot because you must. The enemy sniper adjusted his rifle, preparing to fire at the outpost, at soldiers who had done nothing except serve their country, and men who might die if Mara did not act. She took a breath, found her pause, pressed the trigger. The rifle bucked against her shoulder. The sound echoed across the desert like distant thunder. 1,460 meters away, the enemy sniper collapsed. Mara worked the bolt, chambered another round, kept her scope on target. Training dictated a confirmation shot, but it was unnecessary. The man was not moving, would never move again. She had made the shot, and with it, she had crossed a line she could never uncross. Mara lowered her rifle and keyed her radio. "This is Chun. Target eliminated. One enemy Kia at target zone Alpha." "Roger, Chun. Good work. RTB when ready." She did not move immediately, just sat in her hide, staring at the distant figure through her scope, feeling the weight of what she had done settling into her bones. This was what her father had carried. This was the burden he had tried to explain and failed because some things could only be understood through experience. She had taken a life, saved others by doing so. The math was simple, but the emotion was not. After several minutes, Mara began breaking down her position. She moved slowly, carefully, erasing any sign of her presence. The stalk back to the outpost took longer than the stalk out because she carried something heavier now. Not physical weight, but the knowledge of what she had become. The gate guards welcomed her back with quiet nods. Word had already spread through the outpost. The enemy sniper was gone. The threat was eliminated. Sergeant Chun had done what needed to be done. Kovac met her inside the wire, his face grave. "You okay, Chun?" "I made the shot," Mara said. "Target is down." "That is not what I asked." Mara met his eyes. "I know what you asked, and I do not have an answer yet." She walked to the DFAC and sat alone in a corner, staring at nothing. Mendez found her there 20 minutes later, sitting with cold coffee and untouched food. He sat down across from her without asking permission. "You want to talk about it?" "No." "Okay, we could just sit here then." They sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, Mara spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "My father told me once that the hardest part of being a sniper was not making a shot. It was coming home after and remembering that you are still supposed to be human." "Are you still human, I mean?" "I do not know Mendez. I just killed someone from almost a mile away. They never saw me, never had a chance. How is that human?" "Because you're asking a question," Mendez said quietly. "Because it bothers you. Because you understand what you did and you are struggling with it. That is what makes you human, Chun. Not the shooting, the aftermath." Mara wanted to believe that, wanted to think that her discomfort meant something, that it made her different from someone who killed without conscience. But the man was still dead, and she was still the one who had killed him. Major Holbrook found her an hour later. He pulled up a chair and sat down, his expression serious. "Chun, I am putting the paperwork for your transfer to Scout Sniper School. You have demonstrated exceptional capability under combat conditions. The Marine Corps needs shooters like you." Mara looked at him. "And if I say no, then I will remind you that you are a soldier and I am your commanding officer, and this is not a request." Holbrook's voice softened slightly. "But I do not think you will say no. I think you know what you are. You have been running from it for 2 years, but today you stopped running. Today you accepted who your father trained you to be." "He is right, sir. But that does not make it easy. Nothing worth doing ever is." Holbrook stood. "Get some rest. We roll back to FOB Spiker tomorrow at 0600. And Chun, you saved lives today, both at the ambush and here. Do not forget that while you are processing the cost." He left her alone with her thoughts and her cooling coffee and the memory of a figure collapsing 1,460 meters away. The convoy back to FOB Spiker moved through the dawn like a military parade, tight and professional and alert. Mara sat in the passenger seat of the lead vehicle again, her rifle across her lap, her eyes scanning terrain that suddenly felt different. She was not just a driver anymore watching the road. She was a shooter looking for threats at distances most people could not comprehend. Kovac drove beside her in comfortable silence. The animosity was gone, replaced by something like mutual respect. He had seen what she could do, had watched her save lives twice now. Whatever prejudice he had carried was buried under the weight of demonstrated competence. "You are quiet," he said after an hour on the road. "Thinking. About what?" "About how 3 days ago I was just trying to stay invisible and do my job without making waves. Now I'm being transferred to Scout Sniper School, and everyone knows my name." Mara shifted her rifle slightly. "It is a lot of change very fast. Change is not always bad." Kovac glanced at her. "You are wasting your skills driving a truck. No offense to drivers, but you are capable of so much more." My father used to say that wasted potential is the worst kind of tragedy. Mara watched the desert roll past. I think I was okay with wasting mine because it meant I did not have to face what using it would cost. And now I do not have a choice anymore. I crossed that line yesterday. Killed a man at almost 1,500 meters. Once you do that, you cannot pretend you're not capable of it. The radio crackled with routine traffic, position reports, speed checks, the mundane details of convoy operations that Mara had lived with for 3 months. Soon that would not be her world anymore. Soon she would be in a different place, learning to be what her father had been. Mendez's voice came over the radio from the vehicle behind them. Hey Chun, when you're a fancy scout sniper, you're going to forget about us regular people. Mara, Keter Mike Mendez, you are many things, but regular is not one of them. She heard him laugh over the radio. Fair point. Just saying, do not forget where you came from. Us drivers are proud of you. The words hit harder than Mara expected. She had spent 3 months feeling like an outsider, like someone playing a role badly. And now they were claiming her as one of their own, proud of what she had done, even though it meant leaving them behind. Thanks, Luis. I will not forget. The convoy rolled through a small village without incident. Local people watched from doorways, their faces neutral and unreadable. Children ran alongside the vehicles for a few meters before falling back, laughing and shouting. Normal life continuing despite the war happening around it. Mara thought about the man she had killed yesterday, wondered if he had children, if they were in some village like this one, waiting for a father who would never come home. The thoughts sat heavy in her chest. You cannot think like that, Kovacs said quietly, as if reading her mind. You start personalizing the enemy and it will break you. My father said the same thing, but he also said that the moment you stop seeing them as human is the moment you become a monster. Mara adjusted her rifle. The trick is holding both truths at the same time. They are human and they are the enemy. You can acknowledge their humanity and still do what needs to be done. That is a hard line to walk. My father walked it for 2 deployments. It cost him something. I saw it in his eyes, especially near the end. The weight of all those shots, all those lives. He carried them until the day he died. And now you're walking that same line. Yeah, Mara's voice was soft. Guess I finally understand what he was trying to tell me. The convoy approached FOB Spiker just after noon. The familiar side of the base should have felt like coming home, but instead it felt like arriving at a crossroads. Behind her was the person she had been trying to be. Ahead was the person everyone now expected her to become. Major Holbrook called a formation once the vehicles were secured in the motor pool. The entire convoy unit assembled, dusty and tired, but standing at attention. Holbrook stood before them, his expression proud. Over the past 72 hours, this convoy faced enemy contact twice. We took casualties. We faced ambush. We operated in hostile territory with limited support. And we completed our mission. He paused, scanning the assembled soldiers. I want to recognize Sergeant Mara Chun, who demonstrated exceptional combat effectiveness and saved lives through precision marksmanship under extreme conditions. The formation remained silent, but Mara felt every eye on her. She stared straight ahead, maintaining military bearing, trying not to squirm under the attention. Sergeant Chun will be transferring to Scout Sniper School within the week. She has proven herself an exceptional asset to this battalion and will undoubtedly excel in her new role. Holbrook looked directly at her. Chun, front and center. Mara marched forward, stopped precisely in front of the major, and saluted. Sir. Holbrook returned the salute and then, to Mara's surprise, extended his hand. It has been an honor serving with you, Sergeant. Go make us proud. Mara shook his hand, her throat tight. Thank you, sir. I will do my best. Your best is already better than most. Dismissed. Mara returned to formation, feeling something like pride mixing with the grief and uncertainty. She had proven herself, had shown that her father's training was not wasted, had demonstrated that she could do what needed to be done when lives were on the line. But the cost was accepting who she was, and she was still not entirely sure she was ready for that. After formation, Mara returned to her bunk to pack her gear. She had accumulated very little in 3 months. A few uniforms, some personal items, the locked rifle case that contained her father's custom build. She opened the case and looked at the weapon inside. The rifle he had spent months perfecting for her. This would be her primary weapon at Scout Sniper School. This would be the tool she used to follow in his footsteps. She lifted it carefully, feeling its familiar weight, seeing her reflection distorted in the scope. "Figured I would find you here," a voice said from the doorway. Mara looked up to see Kovac standing there, holding a small box. "Staff Sergeant, just Kovac is fine. We are past the formalities." He stepped into the room and set the box on her bunk. "This is from the guys. From all of us in the convoy unit. Wanted to give you something to remember us by." Mara opened the box. Inside was a metal plaque, roughly engraved with the words, "SGT Chun, not just a driver." Below it was a list of names. Every soldier who had been in the convoy during the ambush. "We had the mechanics make it," Kovac said. "Figured you should know that we see you. Not just for what you did, but for who you are." Mara felt tears threatening and pushed them back. Thank you. I do not know what to say. Say you'll come back and visit when you are some hotshot sniper instructor." Kovac smiled. "Show the new drivers what is possible when you stop limiting yourself." "I will." Mara set the plaque carefully in her pack. "I promise." Kovac extended his hand. "I was wrong about you from the start. I let prejudice blind me to your capability. That was on me. I am sorry it took combat for me to see clearly." "We both learned something," Mara said, shaking his hand. "I learned that hiding who you are does not protect you. It just makes you smaller than you need to be." "Good lesson. Hard learned, but good." Mendez appeared behind Kovac, bouncing on his heels with nervous energy. "You leaving without saying goodbye?" "Would not dream of it," Mara said. "You are part of the reason I stopped hiding, Luis. You and your annoyingly wise sister. I will tell her you said that. She will be insufferable about it." Mendez pulled her into a quick hug. "You're going to be amazing at Scout Sniper School." "I know it. Hope so." Mara pulled back, maintaining composure. "Thanks for believing in me when nobody else did." "I did not believe in you. I just saw you. There is a difference." After they left, Mara sat alone with her father's rifle and the plaque and the weight of everything that had happened. 3 days had changed her entire trajectory. 3 days of violence and revelation and choice had taken her from hiding to exposure, from running to acceptance. She thought about her father, about the promise she had made to him to serve. She had kept that promise, just not in the way either of them had expected. And now she was going to honor it fully, by becoming what he had trained her to be. The fear was still there. The grief was still present. But beneath it was something new. Purpose. Direction. The understanding that her father's gift was not a burden to carry, but a tool to use. And she was finally ready to use it. Mara stood and finished packing. Tomorrow she would board a transport to the States. Next week she would start Scout Sniper School. Eventually she would return to combat as a fully qualified military sniper, not just a driver with hidden skills. But tonight she was still Sergeant Mara Chun, convoy driver, who had saved a battalion and finally stopped running from herself. She looked at the plaque one more time. Not just a driver. No, she thought. Not anymore. She picked up her father's rifle, felt its weight settle into her hands like coming home, and began the work of becoming who she was always meant to be. 6 months later, Mara stood on the firing line at Marine Corps Base Quantico, her father's custom rifle fitted perfectly against her shoulder. The target was 1,800 meters distant, barely visible through the scope, even at maximum magnification. Wind was gusting between 12 and 15 miles per hour from the northwest. Temperature was dropping as evening approached. Every condition was working against her. This was the final test, the shot that would determine whether she graduated Scout Sniper School or washed out in the last week. 1,800 meters under difficult conditions with instructors watching every movement, every calculation, every breath. "Sergeant Chun, you have 5 minutes to make the shot," Gunnery Sergeant Price said from behind her. "This is your final qualification. Make it count." Mara tuned out the instructor's voice and focused on the fundamentals. She pulled out her range card and began running calculations with the precision her father had drilled into her since childhood. Wind speed, direction, temperature, humidity, barometric pressure, elevation change, Coriolis effect at this distance. Every variable that could affect a bullet traveling over a mile. She dialed adjustments into her scope with movements that had become automatic over 6 months of intensive training. The school had pushed her harder than anything she had experienced before. Long days on the range, longer nights studying ballistics and tactics, field exercises that tested endurance and patience. Every moment designed to break students who did not have the mental toughness and physical capability to be a military sniper. Mara had thrived, not because it was easy, but because every challenge was something her father had prepared her for. Every test was a lesson he had already taught. The instructors had been shocked at her baseline skills, had pushed her even harder once they realized what she was capable of. For minutes, Price said. Mara settled deeper into her shooting position, found her natural point of aim, controlled her breathing. This was not competition shooting where she had all day. This was combat simulation where the window of opportunity was brief and the pressure was absolute. She placed her crosshairs on the distant target, a man-sized silhouette barely visible against the tree line. Calculated her hold based on wind and distance. Began her breathing cycle. The world narrowed to the circle of her scope. Nothing existed except the target and the rifle and the space between heartbeats where the shot had to happen. 3 minutes. Mara ignored the time hack. Rushing the shot meant missing the shot. Her father had taught her that patience was not about taking forever. It was about taking exactly as long as necessary and not 1 second more. She watched the wind indicators downrange, saw the patterns in the grass movement, read the mirage, made micro-adjustments to her hold. Everything her father had taught her was present in this moment. Every lesson, every principle, every hour spent on windswept Montana ridges learning to read conditions that most people could not even see. The wind steadied for just a moment. A brief window where the gusts dropped to a more consistent 12 miles per hour. This was the opportunity. Mara found a respiratory pause, applied smooth, steady pressure to the trigger. The rifle spoke with authority, the report echoing across the range. 1,800 meters away, the target went down. 2 minutes 30 seconds, Price said, lowering his binoculars. Target neutralized. First round impact, center mass. Outstanding shooting, Sergeant Shun. Mara saved her rifle and stood, feeling the tension drain from her shoulders. 6 months of work. 6 months of proving herself all over again to a new set of instructors and fellow students. 6 months of confronting her grief every time she picked up her father's rifle. And it had led to this moment. She had passed. She was now a fully qualified Marine Scout sniper. Price walked over, his weathered face showing something that might have been pride. Chin, in my 23 years running this school, I have seen a lot of shooters, natural talents and hard workers and everything in between. But I have never seen anyone come in with your level of baseline skill. Your father trained you well. He did, sir. He trained me for this my whole life, even if I did not realize it until recently. He will be proud of you. Price extended his hand. Welcome to the Brotherhood, Sergeant Shun. You earned it. Mara shook his hand, her throat tight with emotion. Thank you, sir, for pushing me, for not letting me coast on natural ability. Natural ability only gets you so far. You put in the work. That is what made the difference. The graduation ceremony was small and professional. 12 students had started the course. 7 finished. Mara stood in formation wearing her dress blues, the Scout sniper insignia now officially hers to wear. Her mother was there, sitting in the small audience, tears streaming down her face as she watched her daughter follow in her late husband's footsteps. After the ceremony, Mara found her mother waiting outside the building. They embraced for a long moment, neither speaking. Your father would have been so proud, her mother finally said. I wish he could have been here to see this. He was here, Mara said quietly. Every shot I took, every lesson I applied, he was there in all of it. I know you were scared to do this, scared of losing yourself in his shadow. I was, but I learned something over the past 6 months. Mara looked at the Scout sniper insignia on her uniform. Using his training does not make me him. It makes me someone who was loved enough to be taught something valuable. I can honor what he gave me without becoming his copy." Her mother smiled through tears. "That is the wisest thing you have ever said. I learned it the hard way." Mara thought about the convoy ambush, about the enemy sniper at combat outpost valor, about all the moments that had forced her to stop running and start accepting. Sometimes wisdom only comes after you stop fighting what you already know is true. What happens now? Now I get orders. Probably back to Iraq or Afghanistan. This time as a sniper instead of a driver. Mara felt the weight of that reality settling in. This time doing the job my father did. Carrying the burden he carried. But carrying it as yourself, not as him. Yeah, as myself. They walked across the base together, mother and daughter, talking about everything and nothing. Mara's phone buzzed with a text message. She checked it and smiled. It was from Mendez. His sister had been right, as usual. Told you that you would be amazing. Proud of you, Chun. Come back and show us what a real sniper looks like. Another text came through, this one from Kovac. Heard you graduated top of your class. Not surprised. You were always better than you let anyone see. Stay safe out there. Mara pocketed her phone, feeling the connections to the people who had helped her stop hiding. They had seen her when she was trying to be invisible, had believed in her when she did not believe in herself, had pushed her to accept what her father had given her. A week later, Mara stood in the briefing room at Camp Lejeune, receiving her orders. She was being assigned to 1st Battalion, 8th Marines, deploying to Afghanistan in 6 weeks. Her role would be precision fire support, counter-sniper operations, and long-range reconnaissance. Everything her father had done. Everything he had trained her to do. The battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Hayes, reviewed her file with obvious approval. Your record is exceptional, Sergeant Chun. Top graduate from Scout Sniper School. Combat experience in Iraq. 18 confirmed kills, including an enemy sniper at 1,460 meters. We are lucky to have you. Thank you, sir. I will do my best to serve the battalion well. I have no doubt. Hayes looked up from the file. I knew your father. Served with him in Fallujah back in Ophir. He was one of the finest Marines I ever had the privilege of knowing. I am glad to see his daughter carrying on his legacy. Mara felt the familiar tightness in her chest, but it was different now. Not the crushing weight of grief, but something lighter. Pride mixed with sadness. Acceptance mixed with loss. I hope to honor what he taught me, sir. You already are. Hayes stood and extended his hand. Welcome to 1st Battalion. We ship out in 6 weeks. Use the time to prepare. Mara left the briefing feeling the weight of what was coming. Real combat operations. Real missions where her skills would mean the difference between success and failure, life and death. She was not just a student anymore. She was an operator, a professional, a Marine Scout sniper. That evening, Mara sat alone in her barracks room with her father's rifle. She ran her hands over the familiar contours, remembering all the times she had watched him work on it, perfecting every detail. He had built this weapon for her, had known even then that someday she would need it. She opened her laptop and pulled up the video she had recorded before leaving for Iraq the first time. Her father's final message to her, recorded 3 days before the cancer took him. She had watched it maybe a dozen times over the past 2 years, but tonight felt different. His face filled the screen, thin and tired but smiling. Hey kiddo, if you're watching this, it means I am gone and you are about to do something that scares you. Probably joining the service. Probably thinking about whether to use what I taught you or hide it away. Mara felt tears starting, but let them come. I want you to know something, Mara. I did not train you to be me. I trained you to be the best version of yourself. If that means being a sniper, great. If it means being something else, that is okay too. The skills I gave you are just tools. What matters is how you choose to use them and why. He coughed, the sound painful even through the recording. But if you do choose this path, if you do decide to be a shooter, remember this. The rifle does not make you dangerous. Your mind does. Your discipline does. Your willingness to do what is necessary when nobody else can. Those are the things that make you exceptional. Never forget that. The video ended. Mara sat in silence, processing the words she had heard before but was only now truly understanding. He had given her the tools, but not the obligation. The choice had always been hers, and she had made it. Not because she had to, not because anyone forced her, but because when it mattered, when lives were on the line, she had discovered that using her gifts was not about living up to his legacy. It was about being who she was meant to be. Mara stood and began preparing her gear for deployment. 6 weeks to get ready. 6 weeks to ensure every piece of equipment was perfect. 6 weeks before she would return to combat as Scout Sniper Chun instead of Driver Chun. She was ready. Finally, completely ready. Not because she had stopped being afraid, but because she had learned that fear was just another condition to account for, like wind or distance or temperature. You acknowledged it. You factored it into your calculations. And then you took the shot anyway. Afghanistan was different from Iraq. The mountains changed everything. The altitude changed everything. The cold at night and the heat during the day and the thin air that made every breath feel inadequate. Mara had been in country for 3 months now, operating out of Forward Operating Base Blessing in the Khyber province, and she had learned to respect the terrain in ways Iraq never demanded. She crouched in an observation post on a ridge overlooking the Pesh River Valley, her father's rifle steady on its bipod, scanning for threats. Her spotter, Corporal Jake Reese, lay beside her with binoculars, methodically sweeping the valley floor 2,000 meters below. Movement, 3 o'clock, Reese said quietly. Approximately 1,900 meters. 5 individuals moving along the ridgeline. Mara adjusted her scope, found the group. They were moving with purpose, carrying what looked like weapons and equipment. Could be insurgents. Could be locals. The rules of engagement were clear. Positive identification required before engagement. She watched through her scope, waiting for something definitive. One of the men stopped and set up what was unmistakably a mortar tube. That was enough. Mara began her calculations. 1,900 meters. Elevation difference approximately 400 meters. Wind variable, but averaging 10 miles per hour from the west. Temperature, 48 degrees. The thin mountain air meant less resistance, but also less oxygen in her lungs. 5 targets, Reese said. Mortar crew setting up. Call it in or take the shot. Both. Mara keyed her radio while keeping her eye on the scope. Overwatch to TOC. We have 5 military-age males setting up indirect fire position at Grid November Delta 77 Fort Wathrion, requesting clearance to engage. The radio crackled. Overwatch, this is TOC. You are cleared hot. Eliminate the threat. Roger, engaging. Mara settled deeper into her position, controlled her breathing. This was not practice, not qualification. This was real combat against an enemy who would kill American soldiers if she did not stop them first. The man operating the mortar was her primary target. Take him out, and the crew lost their expertise. She placed her crosshairs center mass, accounted for wind and elevation and distance, found her respiratory pause. The rifle spoke. 1,900 meters away, the mortar operator dropped. Mara worked the bolt smoothly, already acquiring her second target. The other men scattered, confused, and searching for the source of fire they could not see. She took the second man before he made it 5 steps. Then the third. The remaining 2 went to ground, hiding behind rocks. Smart, but not smart enough. Mara watched, patient, waiting for them to move. Her father's voice whispered through her focus. Patience, Mara. Let them think they are safe. Let them make the mistake. 5 minutes passed. 10. Then one of the men shifted position, just his head and shoulders visible as he tried to locate the shooter. Mara adjusted her aim and fired. The man went still. The last insurgent broke and ran, sprinting down the ridge away from the disabled mortar. Mara tracked him through her scope, led him by the appropriate distance, and fired. He tumbled and did not rise. 5 for 5, Reese said quietly. Outstanding shooting, Chun. Mara saved her rifle and keyed the radio. TOC, this is Overwatch. 5 enemy Kia. Mortar position neutralized. Good work, Overwatch. Maintain position and continue surveillance. Mara settled back in observation mode, scanning for new threats. This was her job now. This was what she did. Not driving convoys or hiding skills or pretending to be less than she was. This was who she had become. 3 days later, Mara sat in the FOB's small recreation tent, writing an email to her mother on a laptop that took forever to connect to the satellite internet. She had sent dozens of emails over the past 3 months, trying to describe what her life was like without revealing operational details that could compromise security. "Mom," she typed, "I know you worry. I know every email you get from me is a relief because it means I'm still alive. I wish I could tell you not to worry, but we both know that is impossible. So instead I will tell you this. I'm good at what I do. Really good. Dad trained me well, and I am using everything he taught me to keep myself and my Marines safe." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I think about him every day, every time I look through my scope, every time I make a shot, but it does not hurt the way it used to. Now it feels like he is still here, still teaching me, still guiding me through the difficult moments. I finally understand what you meant when you said that the people we love never really leave us. They live on in what they gave us." Movement at the tent entrance made her look up. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes stood there, his expression serious. "Chun, I need you in the TOC. Now." Mara saved the email draft and followed Hayes across the base. The Tactical Operations Center was buzzing with controlled urgency. A large map of the region dominated one wall, marked with symbols and notations. Hayes pointed to a location on the map. "We have a situation. Platoon's Eyes Patrol got ambushed 6 clicks north of here. They are pinned down in a valley with high ground on 3 sides. Enemy has at least 2 machine gun positions and possibly a sniper. Air support is 15 minutes out, but our guys are taking casualties now. What do you need from me, sir? I need you to get eyes on that valley and suppress those machine gun positions until air arrives." Hayes met her gaze. "This is a difficult insertion. Helicopter will drop you on this ridge here, approximately 2,200 meters from the enemy positions. You will be operating alone. Reese is on patrol and cannot be pulled back in time." Mara felt her heart rate increase slightly, but kept her voice steady. "Understood, sir. 2,200 meters is at the edge of my effective range, but it is doable. I know it is. That is why I am sending you." Hayes handed her a radio. "You have 10 minutes to gear up. Helicopter is already spinning up." Mara grabbed her equipment and ran for the flight line. Her rifle, ammunition, rangefinder, spotting scope, ghillie netting. Everything she needed to be a one-woman counterattack. This was what her father had done. This was the burden he had carried, going alone into danger to save others. The helicopter ride was short and violent, the pilot pushing hard to get her into position. They flared over a rocky ridge and Mara jumped out, immediately going to ground as the helicopter peeled away. Incoming fire cracked overhead, but nothing close enough to be immediately dangerous. She low-crawled to a position offering concealment and sightlines, set up her rifle, and began scanning for targets. The valley below was chaos. American soldiers pinned behind rocks and vehicles, muzzle flashes from multiple positions on the surrounding ridges indicating enemy fire. Mara keyed her radio. Overwatch in position. Acquiring targets. She found the first machine gun nest 2,100 meters distant, positioned behind a rock wall with excellent cover. 2 men operating the weapon, pouring fire down into the trapped Marines. This was the shot that mattered. This was why she was here. Mara ran her calculations faster than ever before, knowing that seconds mattered. Adjusted her scope. Controlled her breathing despite the adrenaline and altitude. Found her natural pause. She fired. The gunner collapsed. She worked the bolt and took the assistant gunner before he could take over the weapon. "First machine gun neutralized," she reported. Searching for second position. She found it 12 seconds later, slightly closer at 1,900 meters. Different angle, different wind conditions. She adjusted and fired twice more. Both targets down. Second machine gun neutralized. Scanning for sniper. This was harder. A sniper would not be obvious. Would not be firing rapidly or from fixed position. She had to think like her target, anticipate where she would position herself if she were the enemy. There, a A slight movement on a ridge to the east, approximately 2,300 meters distant. A figure in camouflage, barely visible, but the shape of a rifle was unmistakable. This was the longest shot she had ever attempted in combat, beyond what her instructors would consider advisable, at the absolute limit of her capability and her weapon's effective range. But Marines were dying, and she was the only one who could reach that sniper. Mara calculated everything, every variable, every tiny factor that could affect a bullet at this distance. She dialed in her adjustments, knowing that at 2,300 meters the margin of error was razor thin. She found her pause, pressed the trigger. The rifle bucked. 2,300 meters away, through thin mountain air and crosswind and the limits of physics, the enemy sniper dropped. Target down, Mara reported, barely believing she had made the shot. Outstanding work, Overwatch. Enemy is breaking contact. Air support is inbound. You just saved a lot of lives. Mara saved her rifle and exhaled slowly. Her hands were shaking slightly from adrenaline. 2,300 meters. Her father's longest confirmed kill had been 1,800. She had just exceeded him. The helicopter extracted her 30 minutes later. Back at the FOB, Hayes was waiting on the flight line. Chun, what was your longest shot out there? 2,300 meters, sir. Enemy sniper on the eastern ridge. Hayes stared at her. 2,300 meters. You made a confirmed kill at 2,300 meters. Yes, sir. Conditions were marginal, but the shot was necessary. Marginal. Hayes laughed, a sound of disbelief mixed with pride. Chun, that is not marginal. That is exceptional. That might be a battalion record. Hell, that might be a Marine Corps record for recent operations. Just doing my job, sir. Your job is apparently redefining what we thought was possible. Hayes shook his head. The platoon commander radioed. Said you save at least 6 lives today with those shots. Probably more. Mara felt the weight of that settling in. 6 lives. Maybe more. Because she had stopped running from who she was. Because she had accepted her father's gift and learned to carry the burden that came with it. That night, Mara finished her email to her mother. I cannot tell you details, but today I did something Dad would have been proud of. I used everything he taught me to save people who needed saving. It was hard. It was scary, but it was also right. I think I finally understand why he did this job despite the cost. Because when you have the ability to make a difference, you have the responsibility to try. She sent the email and sat alone with her rifle, cleaning it with the ritualistic care her father had taught her. Outside, the Afghan night was cold and clear, stars brilliant in the thin mountain air. Somewhere out there, 6 Marines were alive because of her. 6 families would not receive the worst news possible. 6 futures remained unwritten because she had made impossible shots at impossible distances. This was her purpose. This was her path. Not her father's shadow, but her own light. And she was finally at peace with it. 1 year later, Mara stood in the Montana wind, looking down at her father's grave. The headstone was simple. Gunnery Sergeant Thomas Chun, United States Marine Corps. Beloved husband and father. The dates of his birth and death. Nothing about his 43 confirmed kills or his 2 combat deployments or the years he spent training his daughter to be exceptional. She knelt and placed her hand on the cold stone. Hey, Dad. I know it has been a while since I visited. I've been kind of busy. The wind carried the scent of sage and distant snow. This was the land where he had taught her to shoot, where she had learned to read wind and calculate distance and understand that patience was a weapon as potent as any bullet. I did it, she said quietly. Became what you trained me to be. Scout sniper. Just finished my 2nd deployment. 27 confirmed kills over 2 years. Saved more lives than I can count. Got a Navy Achievement Medal for that shot at 2,300 meters. They're talking about sending me to advanced sniper school next year. A hawk circled overhead, riding the thermals with effortless grace. I was so angry at you for dying. Angry that you left me with all these skills and no guidance on what to do with them. Angry that you never got to see me use what you taught me. Mara felt tears starting, but let them come. But I understand now. You did not train me, so I would become you. You trained me, so I could choose who I wanted to be. And I chose this. Not because I had to, because I wanted to. She stood and looked out across the valley where they had spent countless hours shooting. The targets were still there, rusted and pockmarked. The shooting bench her father had built still stood against the elements, everything waiting as if he might return at any moment and resume the lessons. I brought someone to meet you. Mara turned as her mother approached, walking carefully across the uneven ground. Behind her came Mendez, now a sergeant himself, visiting on leave, and Kovac, who had requested the trip specifically to pay respects to the man who had trained the shooter who saved his life. Mrs. Chun placed flowers on the grave, her hand resting on the stone for a long moment. I told him you would do great things, she said softly. I was right. Kovac stepped forward, standing at attention. Sir, I never had the honor of serving with you, but I have had the privilege of serving with your daughter. She is the finest Marine I have ever known. You will be very proud. Mendez added his own tribute. Gunny, your daughter saved my life. Saved a lot of lives. Whatever you taught her, it made a difference. Thank you for that. They stood together in silence for several minutes. For people connected by the legacy of a man who had understood that his greatest contribution would not be his own service, but the skills he passed on to someone who would carry them forward. Later, they gathered at the ranch house where Mara had grown up. Her mother made coffee, and they sat around the kitchen table, sharing stories. Kovac talked about the convoy ambush, describing Mara's shooting with an awe that still seemed fresh. Mendez shared how her example had inspired him to push himself harder, to stop settling for adequate. Her mother contributed memories of a young girl who could hit targets most adults could not see. You know what the craziest part is? Kovac said. For 3 months, I thought she was just a driver, just someone who could barely do the job. And the whole time, she was probably the most qualified operator in the entire battalion. I was hiding, Mara said, from grief, from expectations, from myself. You were not wrong to think I was limited. I was limiting myself. What changed? Her mother asked. What made you stop hiding? Mara thought about the moment in the ambush when she had to choose between revealing herself or watching people die. About Mendez believing in her before he had any reason to. About Kovac's transformation from antagonist to advocate. About her father's voice guiding her through impossible shots. I realized that wasting the gifts we were given is its own kind of tragedy. Dad spent years teaching me, poured everything he knew into making me capable. And I was throwing that away because facing it hurt too much. Mara traced the rim of her coffee cup. But pain is not a reason to stop. It is just another condition to account for. Your father used to say something similar, her mother said. He told me once that the difference between a good sniper and a great one is not technical skill. It is the willingness to function despite discomfort. Physical, mental, emotional. Great snipers learn to perform when everything hurts. That sounds like him, Mara said with a small smile. They talked into the evening, sharing memories and stories and the comfortable silence that comes from people who understand each other. Eventually, Mendez and Kovac headed into town to find lodging, leaving Mara alone with her mother. You found your path, her mother said as they stood on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and red. Not his path, yours. I am proud of you for that. It took me longer than it should have. It took you exactly as long as it needed to. Her mother pulled her into a hug. Your father knew you would find your way. That is why he never pushed. He just prepared you and trusted that when the moment came, you would know what to do. I miss him. I know. I miss him too. But he's still here in everything he taught you. Every shot you make carries his lessons. That is a kind of immortality. Mara thought about that as she lay in her childhood bed that night, staring at the ceiling of her room that had not changed since she left for the army. Her father was gone. That was a permanent truth. But what he had given her remained. The skills, the knowledge, the understanding that excellence was a choice made every single day. The next morning, Mara woke early and hiked to the ridge where her father had taught her long-range shooting. She set up her rifle, his rifle, the weapon he had built specifically for her. She ranged a target at the far end of the valley, 1,400 meters, the same distance they had shot together countless times. She settled into position, running through the calculations automatically. Wind, temperature, elevation, every variable accounted for. This was meditation. This was prayer. This was connection to something larger than herself. She fired. The bullet flew true across the valley. 1,400 meters away, the target rang with impact. Mara worked the bolt and fired again. And again. 5 shots, 5 impacts. Perfect execution of lessons learned over a lifetime. Her father's voice was present in every movement, every breath, every trigger press. But the hands on the rifle were hers. The decisions were hers. The purpose was hers. She was not just her father's daughter anymore. She was Scout Sniper Sergeant Mara Chen, combat vétéran, instructor qualified, someone who had saved dozens of lives by accepting who she was meant to be. As she packed up her equipment and began the hike back to the house, Mara felt something she had not felt since her father's death. Complete peace. Not the absence of grief, but the presence of purpose strong enough to carry the grief without being crushed by it. Her phone buzzed with a message. Orders for her next deployment. Back to Afghanistan in 8 weeks. Another rotation. Another opportunity to use her skills to protect those who needed protecting. She texted back her confirmation and continued walking. The Montana wind carried the scent of home. The mountain stood eternal and unchanging. And somewhere in the vast space between earth and sky, Mara imagined her father watching, proud of the woman she had become. Not because she had followed his path exactly, but because she had found the courage to walk her own path using the tools he had given her. If you enjoyed this story, drop a comment and let us know your favorite part or character. Maybe you have had a similar situation where you finally stopped hiding who you really are. We would love to hear about it. Marichin had been just a driver. Someone hiding exceptional skills behind a mask of adequate competence. Someone running from grief and expectation and the weight of a legacy she did not think she could carry. But through fire and choice and the crucible of combat, she had become something more. Not her father's shadow, not a copy of his legend, but her own person, wielding the gifts he had given her with purpose and skill, and the understanding that sometimes the greatest honor we can give those we have lost is to become fully who we are meant to be. She was Scout Sniper Chun, daughter of a warrior, teacher's legacy made real. A woman who could reach across impossible distances and touch the world with precision few could match. And she was finally completely at peace with that truth. The Montana wind sang through the sage as she walked home, carrying the promise of all the tomorrows still to come. Tomorrows where she would continue her father's work in her own way. Tomorrows where his lessons would save lives he would never meet. Tomorrows where his gift would keep giving long after his voice had faded into memory. That was the real inheritance. Not just skills, but the understanding that love expresses itself through what we teach, what we share, what we leave behind for those who come after. Her father had given her everything she needed. Now it was her turn to pass it forward, to be excellent in his honor while remaining true to herself. And in the space between those two truths, Mara Chun had finally found home.